live, which is exciting. And thank you everybody, as usual, for your patience as we navigate our hybrid events here at the Center for Southeast Asian Studies. And we're really pleased, along with the Michigan State University Asian Studies, to welcome our friend, award-winning documentarian and activist Kalyanee Mam here. She was born in Cambodia during the Khmer Rouge Regime, and her family fled their homeland, arriving in the United States in 1981. She later trained at Yale and the UCLA School of Law. Kalyanee's work addresses themes of war and refugees, about families threatened and displaced by the destruction of their land, about forests and rivers, cultures and traditions, and myths and stories. Among her accolades is the Sundance Grand Jury Award for World Cinema's documentary for A River Changes Course, which some of us here watched with our friends at Michigan State University this week. Her documentary short we will show and discuss today, Lost World, received the Eric Moe Award for Best Short on Sustainability. Kalyanee's focus on family and home is especially important this week as Cambodians celebrated Phe Chum Ban, Ancestor Day. As Cambodians gathered to share meals in their home provinces and pray for their families who have passed. Her work reminds us that we should honor our ancestral connections to both family and environment, especially concerning the challenges of today. So SEAS, the University of Michigan and Michigan State University would like to extend Kalyanee and everyone here a happy Phe Chum Ban as we watch her film today. Before we get started, I would like to also highlight a few of our upcoming events. Make sure we know that next week we'll be welcoming Siddharth Chandra from Michigan State University, and then a special event the Monday after at 9:30 in the morning, the past, present, and future of LGBT activism in Singapore, a roundtable on Pink Dot. For those of you who are watching at home and our many online attendees, if you could please exit and go and watch the film. It's available and free to watch at the link attached. And now we will show in the room screen Lost World. So thank you, Kalyanee, again for coming to Michigan and Michigan State. And we will start the film.
I'm so happy and honored to have Kalyanee Mam. Can you come here with us to be here with us? And first of all, we would again say thanks, and I don't know if it's appropriate to applaud for so much work over so many years to share with a beautiful story, and it helped us to think a lot, not only about the world of people somewhere out there, but also get back to us. So at this moment, I believe that all of us probably have a lot of thoughts about who have lost their world, or probably it is a question to get back to us right here. But I believe that this and most of us here already watched the earlier film that you made, A River Changes Course. And I believe that probably the idea of Lost World came much earlier in your projects and in your observation. So I wonder if you can share with us a little bit before we open the floor for the audience about how the world along the river that you see change the course, connect with the Lost World that you will try to show in this film. Yeah, thank you.
Before I answer your question, Hugh, I just want to say thank you, Hugh, to you, Laura Rosick, Dohi, Marsman. Yeah, thank you, Dohi. I just met you now. So, and thank you to the Center for Southeast Asian Studies here. And a special thank you to my sister, Amanda Flame, professor at James Madison College at MSU. Thank you so much for being here, for everything you've done. And couldn't do this without you. Thank you all so much for having me here. And thank you to my dear friend, John, for being here with us. John and I became dear friends in Cambodia in 1999, 2000. And John has a depth of knowledge about Cambodia, and I hope he will share some of his knowledge and wisdom with you today as well. But before I answer your question, I also would like to make an acknowledgement. You know, we can't really talk about lost worlds without talking about the world and the earth that we're standing on right now, the land that we're standing on right now. And I was wondering if Amanda could help us in making that acknowledgement.
So everybody, hi.
This is Amanda.
Hi everyone, I'm Amanda Flame. Is this on?
Yes.
Okay. I'm Amanda Flame and I'm professor at Michigan State University, and it's being a little slow to pull it up. I don't know why. Maybe what I could do, because I wasn't prepared to do
I'm
it,
so
is
sorry.
no,
We just thought
it's
about it.
fine. I think it's just worth making sure everybody knows where your university's land acknowledgement is posted. So particularly when events like this are in solidarity with Indigenous movements and understandings of our relationships to one another and to land, it's a good opportunity to take the moment and acknowledge that all of these relationships to land and to people are in flux and contested and potentially lost. So recovering memory, recovering relationships is about acknowledgement of the past in relationship to today. So I believe this is on Anishinaabe land, correct?
Yes.
Which is the Three Fires
Yep.
Confederacy, Ojibwe, Potawatomi, and Odawa peoples.
And Wyandotte. Wyandotte as well.
Okay, so can you say that again?
Wyandotte?
Wyandotte.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this is not simply the ancestral lands, but also the contemporary lands of these communities as well. So take opportunities to learn about where we are. And thank you. Hello, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Amanda. Thank you, Hyo, for your question. And thank you for connecting the lost world to a river changes course. Because when I began on this journey to learn about my homeland, just a little background about myself. My family and I were, I was born in Cambodia during the Khmer Rouge regime, and we went through the Khmer Rouge, and when the Khmer Rouge fell out of power in 1979, we fled Cambodia. We journeyed to the border of Cambodia and Thailand to the refugee camps for 2 years, and then we eventually came to the United States in 1981. And I think all my life has been devoted to trying to understand where I come from and understand who I am, because we were displaced. We were uprooted from our homeland. And finally, I had an opportunity to come back to Cambodia and to learn more about my homeland. And over the years, I worked with the Documentation Center of Cambodia. It's an organization that documents the crimes of the Khmer Rouge, and not only with documents from that period, but also going out into the provinces and speaking with people and survivors of the Khmer Rouge regime. And so I was part of that oral history documentation from the very beginning. And John joined us later on in 1999, to do further documentation legally. And that process really helped me to understand our, contemporary history. But what I realized along the way was that, although we had survived a genocide, in 1975, from 1975 to 79, I realized that the destruction of the land was now taking place, another kind of genocide, and I felt really called, to document that destruction, which then that calling resulted in the River Changes course, which is a story about 3 families struggling to survive the onslaught of development and globalization, deforestation, dam construction in the northeastern part of Cambodia, in Kampong Chnang, around the Dalai Sap lake, which is one of the few lakes / rivers that changes course during the wet and dry season. And I just thought that was amazing that the river changes course, because as I was documenting all this, I could see that Cambodia was actually changing course in so many ways. We were moving from a landscape where people were living in relationship to the land and to the forests and to the rivers and to the lakes, and in relationship with non-human beings, creatures of the earth. And moving from that, from a very more extractive kind of relationship, which is, I believe, is the kind of relationship that many of us live in now, where we're not in relationship with, but we are extracting from, the very place that actually gives us life. So I just found that really so fascinating, but also deeply disturbing, that this change is taking place in Cambodia, and I really wanted to understand it. And so in a River Changes course, I was observing the families, I was observing their way of life, I was observing their intimate relationships with one another and with, their surrounding landscape. In a lost world, I felt like I had an opportunity not only to observe that relationship, that beautiful relationship, and Pala's relationship and her family and her community in Basorlao, their relationship with the mangrove forests, but I also had a chance to observe what happens when that relationship is severed, and what is the cause of that severance? What caused, Pala and her community to lose her mangrove forests? And we see that in Singapore. So Lost World was an opportunity for me to really share my observations with all of you. And I hope an opportunity for you to see maybe yourself reflected in the mirror, how you may represent, that relationship of extraction, that relationship of taking, that relationship of commodification, of the very, I don't want to use the word resources because I don't view the land as a resource, but the very source of life that has been a source of life for us, for all the times that we've been on this earth. So yeah, thank you for your question. I hope that was like too extensive.
So, yes. I'm gonna take a little bit privilege to just share. So I watched a River Change course first, and then Lost World, and I feel like there's so much connection between two of these films. And of course, I started probably like a very many audience who just want to explore the world in Cambodia, and then expanded to a lot more connected to not only with Singapore. I also know that the similar situation happened in Vietnam. The story about those Cham people in Cambodia have a lot of similarities in Vietnam. And now I learn more about your own life. I feel like I learned about the very, very first chapter of the story, about how the displacement just affect all of us in a different way. So I really, really appreciate that you share the story. Yes. So now I think I would like to give the audience for a chance to ask questions. Not only with this film, but if you want to, share the thought about the film that you watch at home, we welcome that.
And also, you're welcome to also just make comments.
Mhm.
You don't necessarily have to ask me a question or anything.
Yeah.
I'm really, I've just been so amazed by the students, at MSU, and I haven't had a chance to speak with all of you, but I have had a chance to speak with Chloe a lot. I'm just amazed by all of you and how open-minded you are, how willing you are to your willingness to learn and open your heart, to learning. And so I'm really curious to hear your perspective as well. So please feel free to share.
Wow, Kalyanee, what a beautiful and powerful film. Congratulations. The irony of the Singaporean exhibit being called Lost World is thicker than the mangrove forest. And I really thought that among many of the visuals and the music that David composed or played were such powerful ways of tying the story together and communicating this sort of interconnections between different aspects of our lives. I wanted to ask you, about, well, actually, I should say also another thing that was powerful for me personally is you and I remember that going down to the coast 20 years ago, those little crabs the women were dealing with used to just crawl right into your hand. I mean, they were absolutely ubiquitous. And to see that there are so few is really a striking how much damage can be inflicted on nature in such a short period of time. I wanted to ask you a question that gets to the other side of your work, because you're both an award-winning filmmaker, but also an activist with a law degree. And to ask you about the landscape for activism in this area. The film alluded to the fact that when she goes out and they try to chase these dredgers away, that they're threatened with jail. Most people in the room probably know how the Hun Sen government has used the courts and the security forces to repress mercilessly dissent on this front. What can you tell us about the nature of activism that's being done locally and internationally on this really tragic set of issues?
That's a wonderful question, John. I've been so fortunate. I have to thank Mother Nature Cambodia. They're a group of local grassroots organization. I'm still working with them as well to support the organization, but they're a group of grassroots activists led by Alex Gonzalez Davidson, who's an activist who's been living in Cambodia for like 12, 13, 15 years, I guess like almost 20 years now. He learned fluent, Khmer. He's originally from Spain. And he just, felt really passionate about Gakong, just this area, and wanted to first, with a group of young Cambodian activists, protect Arang Valley from being dammed, which is the subject of another short film that I worked on, a threat to Cambodia's sacred forests for New York Times op docs. And so we were working on trying to get the dam stalled, and successfully were able to stop the dam from being constructed. And then this was another ongoing activist movement, was to stop the dredging of the sand and its export to Singapore. And we were actually able to stop, get a moratorium on the sand dredging. And that totally answers your question, in that local activism, grassroots activism, is such an important aspect of this movement to stop the destruction. And unfortunately, many activists face threats by the Hun Sen government, by the government, because they are impinging on the government and corporations who are supported by the Cambodian government, from making money. The sand dredging, I think, brings in about $2 million a year. It's very, very little compared to like this amazing resource, mangrove forests and wildlife and fish and crab and all the resources that, the people depend on. But, for the Hun Sen government and their, the companies that rely on his support, that's just another source of income for them. But local activism is super important because, we are working with the communities. We are going into the villages, into the communities, and providing support for the communities. The activists are not necessarily the ones who are at the forefront. It's the local community members who are the ones who are speaking out, and they are being given the space to voice, their grievances, and voice their grievances not only in a documentary, but also in the international news network. And actually, I was speaking in Berkeley the other week, and someone came up to me and asked me, like, what can they do if they have, a local problem? How can they get the word out there, and how can they protest against the government? I said, what you need to have local support, but at the same time, you also needed to get the word out there in the international news media. Because once it hits the international media, then there's going to be a lot of pressure, on the government to change their course. So it's really important to have those partnerships locally as well as internationally.
So I have a question. My name is
Uh-huh.
Monique Freeman. I'm a PhD in linguistic anthropology working for the center. And so I'll be voicing some of the questions from the virtual audience. And so one of the questions someone sent was asking what the reactions from people in Singapore were when you were filming there, especially kind of the way that Singapore is framed in this narrative that you show us in the film.
Yeah, I was just talking to John about this, that I think the film came out 2019, spring of 2019, and I haven't really had a chance to, go out because of the pandemic and everything, go out and screen the film, elsewhere. And we did submit it to the Singaporean International Film Festival, but it was not accepted. And we weren't given a reason why it wasn't accepted. But I think now that we are able to maybe travel a little bit again, and maybe next year we're going to start, I would really like to go to Singapore, and screen the film. And I know of other opportunities we can do it, how we can do it. We don't need to be in part of a festival to get that, to make that happen. But yeah, I haven't received any responses, personally yet. However, when we were in Cambodia, and it's not featured in the film, Pala, we decided to go to Singapore. And Pala and Mona Simon, she's the photographer for the film. She also came with us and just was a great support. And Pala was, we all went together. And we actually set up images of Pala in the mangrove forest, images of the mangrove forest, we had a little outdoor gallery set up on the marina. And then we had an iPad, and I loaded up a little short clip, I think from where Pala was looking for clams in the sand. A little short clip of that, a little short clip of the, all the mangroves and everything, and then the dredging. And Pala held the iPad and she shared this little short video clip with people passing by. And she went up to this one person and be like, "Oh, dear brother, this is how she is, can I speak with you?" And I was the translator. And then she had a conversation with people as they were going by, and everyone was shocked. Singapore is, is very diverse. There's people who are local, who are born there, grew up there. There's also a lot of people internationally who come from outside the country to work. And so she spoke with people who are from there, people who were transplants, people who were immigrants, so many different people, and everyone was shocked. Not a single person was aware that sand dredging in Cambodia was taking place, and that sand was being removed from Cambodia to help expand Singapore's landmass, or that we were standing on the ground, the marina, which was built on top of the sand. And so they were really shocked, and they had no idea. And then they also started, telling their story of living in Singapore, and how challenging it was, to be outspoken and many other things too. So that was really interesting. And I'm so glad that we did that. Maybe it's something that we can put together to share with people, even though it didn't make it into the film. I think it's really important that people are aware of how Singaporeans may view this, just as I think many of us, when we become aware of the history of the land here, that we are standing on land where blood was shed, that has an impact on us too. And that awareness, that level of awareness can increase our awareness of so many other things as well. So it's a matter of education and becoming more aware. And I'm really glad that we had an opportunity to speak with Singaporeans on that level. Yeah, thank you for your question. Mhm.
Thank you so much again for coming and for this beautiful film. And every time I watch it, something comes to mind. And today, as I was watching it, I was thinking about how the dredging and the effects of that on the movement of people, as we, look at this refugee and stateless crisis around the world. How does this affect the movement of people in Cambodia and their ability to live a good life in Cambodia?
Wow. Laura, that's such an amazing question. And Laura, I also want to just thank you for mentioning Battambang. That's so kind of you, to mention that, because that is a very special holiday for us in our homeland. Battambang is a celebration similar to like the Day of the Dead here. It's a celebration of our ancestors, and where we come from, a remembrance. And, I grew up, praying at the altar of our ancestors, like daily. I'm sure, Hugh, you did the same too, in Vietnam. We would light incense, and candles and pray and kneel, actually not standing, but kneeling, expressing our humility to our ancestors. And, what I realized through the years that our ancestors are not, just our grandparents, our great grandparents. Our ancestors are really the trees, and the mountains and the rivers and the lakes, and all the creatures that are inhabit, the same land that we do, that they are our ancestors too. And, and when we were praying, I knew that my mom would, say a prayer always, please, we honor you, and please, give us protection, protect us always, and forgive us if we do something that may not be, right. And I think that asking for forgiveness always, like, it really struck me as like, like, why ask for forgiveness? But yeah, it's true. We may not be completely aware of our actions and our behaviors and how it may have impact. But we can only do the best that we can now. And then with awareness, greater awareness, we can do better, right? Like Toni Morrison says. But yeah, I really thank you, Laura, for mentioning our ancestors, because that's, to me, has been really such a long journey, of truly connecting. Because I actually, when growing up, when we were praying at the altar, I never really internalized it. I want to be completely honest with you. This, today is like, I never really believed it. I would be like, there was like a part of me that was very critical. I was taught in school, I went to school and I was taught to be rational. I was taught to question everything. I was taught to not believe everything I hear, which are all great things, by the way, but there are limitations. And, I was taught that to be like, very critical. And so I was critical of my parents. It's like, ancestors, schmancestors, what is that anyway? I really didn't truly, when I put my palms together, I didn't truly believe, and it wasn't until the last few years when I began my journey of healing, healing from, what happened to us during the Khmer Rouge regime and our uprooting, from the land, and also healing and grieving my father's death, at a very young age, at the age of 60, from liver cancer and from, I say, more depression and, suffering from what he went through during the Khmer Rouge, than anything else. And also him coming here to this country and not feeling like he really belonged here. I never had a chance to grieve that. And what I realized was that I also never had a chance to grieve what he had passed on to me, and I was just telling John this earlier, and he had passed on to me all of his, his depression, his struggles, his sense of not belonging in this country. And I think I struggled for a long time to try to belong, and to try to fit in, to try to be part of this place that I lost connection with my ancestry. And it wasn't until I returned to my homeland and started to reconnect again with, this land that it, suddenly I felt like I was, reconnecting again with myself. And that was through, my ancestors. So Battambang is a very yeah, it's a really important holiday, you know, and that's what I'm realizing now. I didn't really realize it before. But Laura, I lost track of your question. What was it again? It was
Movement of people.
yes, movement of people. I'm really happy that you brought that up because and it actually is related to what I was just expressing about ancestry, is that what I've been seeing in Cambodia is that there's more movement. Not only movement of commodities, you know, and sand and, you know, things, you know, cassava, you know, lumber, timber, crossing borders, you know, actually commodities have more freedom than people do. You know, they don't need a visa, they don't need a passport to cross borders. They just need profit motive. And so I see the movement of things, but I also see the movement of people, because as the things are being displaced, the land, the trees, the forest, the water, those I don't want to say things, so they're not things. They're non-human, but they are living, you know, and breathing. But as they are being displaced, humans are being displaced as well. Because as I saw in the mangrove forest, is that the community in Khmer, they depend on the mangrove forest for their livelihood. They depend on the crab, the fish, and the crab and the fish depend on the mangroves. And the mangroves depend on the land and the sand. So it's a ripple effect of when one thing is displaced within this beautiful broad ecosystem, you know, or ecology, then everything kind of falls out of place. And so a lot of people are being displaced because they can't work anymore. They can't fish in the water. There's no more crab, there's no more fish. The water level has become so deep that the fish can't lay their eggs. You know, the crab can't lay their eggs. The current has become so fast that the eggs will just be swept away. And so people are forced to migrate, you know, to neighboring countries, to Thailand, you know, to South Korea, to Singapore. The very country that has taken land from Cambodia is now offering Cambodians work as service, you know, workers, you know, working in households, cleaning houses, you know, doing what we think is menial labor, you know. So the First Nations are taking the resources, taking the land, and now taking the people themselves. And with that movement comes change in the household. You know, Pala tells me the saddest thing is that once people are moving, the communities are empty. You know, you heard the woman, you know, she's like, yeah, you know, now there's no one at home anymore. So there's emptiness in the village, you know, and then, you know, families are torn apart. They no longer can hold on to their rituals of eating together, you know, just being in the same place, you know, sharing a meal, having a conversation while you're having the meal. You know, when you go fishing, it's not just fishing. They're talking, you know, they're gossiping. You know, Pala tells me Lover's Island is the island that you saw in the background, you know, at the end. Lover's Island is where people convene. You know, it's like a cafe, she says, you know, they all come together, you go fishing, go crabbing, and then you talk, you gossip, you know, there's community. So then the threads that hold the community together falls apart. And once that falls apart, you know, then, you know, then, you know, people are left alone and you essentially have what you have here in the United States. You know, everyone living in separate units, nuclear families, in the suburbs, you know, or in the cities, people living alone with no one to talk to, no one to give them a hug, no one to express love and care, no one to share a meal with. So the loneliness and the lostness feeling that we have here in the United States, it's being felt all over the world because of migration. Yeah. It's a brilliant question, Laura. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Trevor. I'm a dual degree here with CEAS in the Ford School. Thanks so much for joining us today. I just have two questions. Historically, how long has like sand dredging been uprooting communities in Cambodia? And then follow that up, like after this moratorium of the dredging was implemented, has like Palau communities seen like improvement with the mangrove forest and just the nature around them, or is there like an irreversibility to the dredging that happened?
So the dredging has been taking place since, I think 2007 or something like that. Yeah, I think 2007, 2008. And the dredging is not only for export of sand to other countries, but also for local consumption. So Cambodia, as John will attest to, has been developing at a major rate. I mean, there are like buildings being put up that we didn't see like a year before, within months. The construction is like so fast. There's like no rules, no regulations. People are building everywhere and they need materials to build. So sand is a very important material for construction, but also the sand is used to fill in areas. And yeah, and when we were working there, they started what is it? Taking out water. What do you call it? With the lake, they started draining the lake. There are some lakes in Cambodia, in Phnom Penh, in the city, Bangkok, Battambang, they were all drained and then filled with sand in order to construct buildings, office buildings. And in that process, many families were evicted, and removed from their homes, in homes that they've been living in for generations sometimes. And then, forced to, and I have a lot of footage of this, forcibly evicted with very little or no compensation. So what was happening in the countryside was also happening in Cambodia too. So the sand dredging, the sand has a lot of uses. It's being dredged and then used to fill up the lake, but also the lakes are being drained. And, now we have these structures in place. So it's been fueling a construction industry locally. We were able to stop the sand dredging from taking place and being exported internationally, but we have no control over the local consumption, so it's still taking place. And it's not just in Akakong, it's also in Kandal province too. There's sand dredging, in the rivers and stuff. And so you can imagine, the effect it has on the local ecologies. I know this is happening not only in Cambodia, but also in India, in Mumbai. There are mangrove forests in the city that are being dredged, and it's actually, a lot of it is in the black market too. People are doing it illegally and undercover. Yeah, I don't know how they're doing it undercover. It's like so open, but they're doing it. And but I have been speaking with some community members in Gosserlau, and they tell me that they think that even though there's a moratorium on export of sand internationally, especially to Singapore, they think that it's still continuing because they see big ships, filled with sand, and the sand is very fine. The quality of the sand is such that it's not for local consumption. The quality of the sand indicates that it's being exported internationally. So even though, there are rules or there's restrictions, perhaps, it's not really necessary that it's being followed.
I think if I probably let me I don't know if it's questions but comment or kind of some of the technical analysis that just by listening to you, I think one of the things here and you can correct me, I would when you work with people in Cambodia, the idea of even the term that people refer to sand or land or soil, or are they the same concept or different? Because when sand become like a commodity, right?
Yeah.
It have a definition of like very physical material and where it's going to be used for construction or filling, and they have their own guide. So the time that sand or soil or dirt become natural resources that you point out, that it takes away a lot of connection, because for people who consider sand as part of their livelihood, it also means tree, fish, crab, right?
Yeah.
But when it becomes like a natural resources, we go to Singapore, even we know that, okay, getting sand and fill up the land is terrible, but it's very hard for people to contextualize how it connects with other parts of life. And I think what you mentioned here is just so meaningful to understand how when we move from something part of the nature into community. So can you just kind of comment very quickly how the Cambodian perception of soil and land?
Thank
And
you.
then we can like
Yeah, Hio, thank you so much. Yeah, like you say, the sand, the soil is not just, it's not a commodity for Cambodian people, it's the land. And the land, as we believe it, is the source of life. And, I remember, so clearly an interview that I had with an elder in Orang Valley. And this was after one of the ceremonies that we had to honor the spirits of ancestors. And I spoke with him, just privately, just the two of us. And I asked him, what is the most important thing in life? And he was just like, he didn't think about it. He didn't like mull over it. It's like, oh, let me, he didn't respond with a technical answer. He didn't respond with like lots of sentences or a paragraph. He just said land and forest, oh, land and water. I'm sorry, land and water. That's all he said, land and water. And I was just blown away, I've never been given such a definitive answer to life until that moment. And that really taught me so much, that we are just swimming in around in so much information, so many theories, so many studies. And when the answer is simply right in front of us, it's land and water and air that we breathe. Those are really the most important things. And without land and water and air, we really cannot have life. And, we have, in Cambodia, we believe there are spirits that inhabit the land, that inhabit the water, and these spirits protect the land and protect the water. And therefore, it is our job, not our job, but and not even a duty. It's like our meaning in life, the purpose for our life on earth is to protect those spirits. And by protecting those spirits, the spirits will protect the land and the water. And then the land and water are protected, then all creatures are protected too. We are part of a circle of life. I know that sounds really, corny, but we are. And that's really one of the most important things that I learned, on my journey. Yeah.
So for the last word, on behalf of the center,
Yeah,
you want
it's
to
a perfect time to end.
Yes.
It's like a perfect-
And also just let you know, a lot of my students here, so hopefully you all learn a lot to this session. So we thank you for not only share the story, but also be here, share your own perspective about. Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for everybody who be here and for online audience who join our session today. Yes.